Hi, I'm Bill Swanner, the practicing gardener. Get through my neighborhood this past month or so, the redbud trees have been blooming. It's the third week of March and the blooms are starting to leave, but it's the first chance I could get to make this video. And I thought about the redbud trees and the different type of varieties, so I went to a local nursery and I just took pictures of the ones that they're selling. And so I thought I'd do a short video on those redbud trees. In part, if you'd like to play sleuth and try to figure out, name that tree in your neighborhood, or if you're perhaps looking for a redbud tree, this would be some sort of primer for you. Walking down the neighborhood, you see this beautiful purple bloom right here, and it's not a redbud tree, it's a wisteria. But if you just see a pretty color, you might get mistaken. Or is that a white redbud tree, or is that a Bradford pear? Because you simply see the white blooms. That's what we're going to talk about. This is a wisteria. This is a redbud tree. So, redbud trees are blooming. They're beautiful. The colors just really kind of strike you, especially coming out of winter when it's kind of dull and gray, and all of a sudden these beautiful red, purplish, pinkish flowers start popping up all over the place. This is in my neighborhood. I think I know what this is. I'm going to do a little bit more research. I just passed it walking, took a picture. I'll go back and take a look at it. I know where it is. This is a Chinese redbud tree, and I'll get more about this later on, but I saw this up at the Dallas Arboretum and Botanical Gardens. Chinese redbud, that's interesting. So that is an Oklahoma redbud that I planted about 4 years ago, and it was right about where my hand is and how tall it was when I planted it. Planted correctly, it really has done quite well. It's time for some trimming because it's having some competing branches for the dominance, and so I'll fix that a little bit later. There are three redbud trees that I'm familiar with in our country. There may be more. I don't know. There's the western, also known as the California redbud tree, the Cerces occidentalis. You'll find that in the foothills and the mountains of California. There is the eastern redbud tree, the Cerces canadensis, which is you'll find through most of our country, especially in the Texas, Oklahoma, up through Canada. And then the local one I just mentioned, the one that's being imported, is the Cerces chinensis, and it's native to the woodlands of central and southern China. And we'll talk more about the eastern and the Chinese. The western, I'm not going to mess with. I don't think you can buy them here, and I don't know if they'll grow here. So first off, the Latin name Cerces comes from the Greek word kerkes, which means weaver's shuttle, referring to the seed pod resembling the size and shape of a weaver's shuttle, which is sometimes used to move thread back and forth on the loom. The common name redbud comes from the inner bark that bears a reddish color, so you can have a white Texas redbud, it is white Texas redbud. Your final answer on Jeopardy, if you're ever on there, George Washington and Thomas Jefferson both planted redbuds at their respective homes in Mount Vernon and Monticello. Seeing as they're on the eastern coast, we can reasonably assume that they'd be a variety from the eastern redbud. The spring flower, as I'll go through, you see on most of these slides, is enhanced by cold winters. For those of you who grow fruit, especially fruit trees, especially peach trees, as you do your research, you'll know that various peach trees have certain chill hours. And so a peach tree that requires a lot of chill hours probably will not do well in San Antonio. There are some peach trees that do better here because the chill hours required. Well, the same thing seems to be true for the redbud trees. There's a certain degree of coldness for a certain length of time that really produces the beautiful buds. The redbuds are susceptible to fungal diseases, especially at the younger they are, and so that's something you'll need to pay attention to. The eastern redbud, also known as the Cerces canadensis, is most frequently listed as having three primary varieties. One is the canadensis, that's the eastern redbud. Then was the mexicana, smaller, more shrubby. And then the texensis, which is smaller than the redbud, and I'll go into it more, but smaller, but it's a little more drought tolerant, larger than the Mexican redbud. So the two redbud trees that are native to North America are the eastern and the California. So let's take a look at our redbud trees. The eastern redbud, the Cerces canadensis, 20 to 30 feet tall, about 20 to 30 feet wide, full sun, pink flowers, well-drained soil. If you want to know more about the tree, you can go to here to this website. Why is it important to know? Well, 20 to 30 feet tall means you don't plant it 5 feet from the house. It needs to have space. And if you have more of a typical urban yard that's maybe 30 by 30, this may be the only tree that you really need in your landscaping. Don't buy 2 of these things because they're going to require more room than you might be able to give it. So this is the Cerces canadensis, the eastern redbud. Pink flowers, 20, 30 feet tall. This is the Oklahoma redbud, the Cerces canadensis variety, Oklahoma. I think at one time it might have been the reniformces. I'm not really sure. That was on the literature. I put it in there. Look at the height of this Oklahoma redbud, 30 to 40 feet tall, 15 to 20 foot spread, full sun. It can take some partial sun. Its flowers are deep pink to red. So here you have pink flowers in the eastern redbud. The Oklahoma has a deeper redder tint to it. So same size tree, different color buds. You kind of determine which one you might like. This is the Cerces canadensis variety texensis, 15 to 20 feet tall, significantly smaller than the 30-foot or Oklahoma or eastern redbud. Ideally, it's an understory tree, so that is the tree that could be planted in the afternoon shade of an oak tree, or a Mexican sycamore, or a larger tree, like maybe a cedar elm. Give it a little protection. The colors of the clusters on here, the blooms, are purplish to red. So we've gone from pink to deep pink to red, and now we've gone red even to purple. So it's a different color plant. It's bloom. It's more drought tolerant than the eastern, but the leaves are larger than the Mexican redbud, which is what we have here. Cerces canadensis variety mexicana, 11 to 15 feet. So this is a much smaller tree than the eastern or the Oklahoma. Pinkish to red blooms, full sun to partial shade. A lot of these are going to say full sun to partial shade. The more sun they get, the more blooms they could possibly put out. But the idea is the partial shade is to protect them from our blistering hot western sun, which really gets us through, let's say, July, August, September. That's the idea when it says partial sun or partial shade. This is the forest pansy, the Cerces canadensis variety forest pansy. I had this picture because this is really what it's known for. Look at that beautiful foliage. 20 to 30 feet tall, 25 to 35 foot spread. So if you have a traditional urban lawn, this might be the only tree you can manage. Just go from one end of your lawn to the other end and measure it. If it's 35 feet, this is about the only tree you can put there. Give it room to breathe. Like the other trees, the full sun, the more sun it gets, the more blooms it will get. The blooms are tiny clusters of rose to purple. But after the blooms have gone away, this beautiful foliage comes out. And one thing you're going to find consistent in these sort of varieties of the eastern redbud is right here. Does not transplant well. Plant young and leave it. If you can, get us a 1 gallon. I don't know if they sell them in 1 gallon. But the smaller trees, they don't look as cool as the larger trees. But the smaller trees are much easier to grow and to manage. If you have a 1 gallon container, you dig that whole 1 gallon container wide, dig it 4 feet wide, give those plants to grow, and loosen the soil for about 4-6 feet out. Give those roots a chance to grow, allow that water to soak in a little bit better. But the bigger the tree, the longer it takes the tree to get acclimated. And so the smaller trees in the 1 gallons, they're easier to acclimate than, say, a 10-gallon tree. The 10-gallon tree looks great. It's immediate color, but it really takes a lot more work. Get a small 1 gallon one if you can. Loosen the soil for about 4 to 6 feet. Pay attention to that plant. In about 5 years, you're not going to be able to tell the difference between the 1 gallon and the 5 gallon. But the forest pansy is known for its beautiful foliage. Lavender twist, the Cerces canadensis covey, reaches 5 to 6 feet tall. Weeps has 6 to 8 feet width. Full sun. rosy lavender pink flowers. Again, full sun gives you the most flowers. It may need some shade from our blistering hot sun. And as I said, the consistent theme does not transplant well. Plant it young where you want it to grow and leave it. This is the Merlot Redbud, Cerces canadensis variety Merlot, 12 feet tall, 15 feet wide. So this, you might be able to get a couple trees in your lawn as opposed to an Oklahoma. Again, full sun gives you the most blooms. Part sun gives it some protection in our heat. It needs the chill hours to set the blooms. It does not transplant well. You plant it young and leave it. I didn't put down the color of the blooms. The colors are going to be more of a Merlot color, which is why it has the name Merlot. This is Ruby Falls, and I think this is the one that's in my subdivision. I'll be looking at it more closely. Last time I was just on a walk and I took a picture. I'll go over it, knock on the door, and tell the people I'm studying their tree, and hopefully they'll be patient with me. Cerces canadensis Ruby Falls, 6 feet tall, that's it. 4 feet wide, 4-foot spread. Like the other plants, like the other trees, the more sun gives you the more blooms. It would probably appreciate some protection from our blistering hot sun. It needs the chill hours to really get the color out. The bloom on these, on the Ruby Falls, is going to be a lavender red color to it. This is the Cerces canadensis Texas White. It's a white redbud. 20 by 20, 20 feet tall, 20 feet wide. Again, full sun. It can tolerate some shade. It loves our soil, loves our pH. Interesting enough, the literature says it's highly tolerant of urban pollution. And it might benefit from being planted in a sheltered location. This is the Rising Sun Redbud, Cerces canadensis JN2, given the name the Rising Sun. 8 to 12 foot tall and wide. Notice it's much smaller. The beautiful foliage, peach, gold, and yellow. The colors of the blooms are pea-like, and they're pale pink flowers. Again, it gives you most blooms in full sun. Partial sun would probably appreciate in our heat. It needs those chill hours to set flowers, and it does not transplant well. So for some of these in South Texas, what it might mean is that in the winter months, if it's planted around a cedar elm or a red oak, I'm looking around my yard, or a maple tree, it's getting that full sun. But when the cedar elms and the maples, the red oaks, they start to bloom, it starts to give some of these trees the shade it needs, as opposed to putting it out in the lawn by itself where there's no protection, or planting it around a live oak tree. A live oak tree provides year-round shade, and the tree might not get the sun that it needs to give the color of the blooms that you're looking for. And here's the one I saw at the Dallas Arboretum and Botanical Gardens, the Cerces chinensis Avondale, 10 to 12 feet tall. Again, flowers most in full sun, might need some protection in our heat, needs to chill hours to set the color. The colors are going to be a dark rose to purple. So we've had everything from pink to red to lavender to dark purple. Each one a little bit different color. Does not transplant well. Buy it small and leave it. I tried to get the colors, and some of the colors work and some of them don't. Let's see what happens. This is the Eastern Redbud, and compare that to the Texas Redbud. A little bit darker. Compare that to the Mexican Redbud, how much lighter it is in the pink. And compare that to the Merlot, which is more of a wine color. You look at the Texas and the wine color, and comparing that to the Forest Pansy, the brighter pink. So if you are of a curious mind and the redbud trees are still blooming, try to figure out what redbud tree it's growing, or next year in February and March when the trees come out. Well, this year, make note of where the redbud trees are, and then when you take your walks next year, your walks to the park, so you drive, see if you can start to name that tree to see really how good how much good an arborist you are. Here's a different perspective of those trees. This is not width, this is height. So the Oklahoma, it can be 30 feet on up. The next one down is the Eastern, the Forest Pansy, and the Texas White, even though it's not white. Next down, just under 20 feet, is the Texas redbud. A little bit smaller is the Mexican redbud. Smaller still is the Merlot Rising Sun and the Avondale. And then the shortest ones of all be the Lavender Twist and the Ruby Falls. So if you know the size of your yard or the area you're going to plant, you can see which one of these trees you might want to plant. Or what contrasts and colors you might have between those various buds. So these trees are susceptible to insects and diseases and various plant problems. One, leafcutter bees can damage the foliage. Root rot and stem rot can appear on trees grown in moist or poorly drained soils. If these trees are used to our area and they grow in the wild, they're used to maybe 30 inches of rain a year. And if they're growing in the wild, they've adapted to those situations, which are going to be pretty well drained. You're not going to find them in the lower dry creek beds necessarily where there's going to be a lot of water. So what happens is we buy these trees that are used to maybe 30 inches of rain. We put them in our lawns, and then for 40 weeks a year, we add an inch of water a week, plus the 30 inches they normally get. That's 70 inches of water that these trees are getting that are used to 30 inches. So when you put them in your lawn, make sure the soil is well drained. Make sure it's in a place where the water drains off, but it just doesn't sit there and hold all that water. Otherwise, you're increasing the chance of something go wrong. Deer can damage the trees by rubbing up against it. The falling seed pods can create a litter problem. So that is a presentation on the redbud trees that are available. Just recapping them real quickly. The eastern redbud, tall, pink flowers. The Oklahoma redbud, tall, deep pink to red flowers. The Texas redbud, only maybe 20 feet, but purplish red flowers. The Mexican redbud, smaller still, pinkish to red flowers. The forest pansy, that's going to be a tall one, but look for that beautiful foliage when the blooms go away in the spring. Lavender twist, going to be that really interesting one, but it's going to be 5 to 6 feet tall, but it's going to be wide, 6 to 8 feet wide, which is why I think that one at the front is a Ruby Falls. The Merlot, look for that beautiful wine-colored blooms. Here's that Ruby Falls. It's going to be maybe only a 4-foot spread. That's why I think I know what that one is. And then Texas white bud, Texas white redbud, and the Rising Sun, and then the Chinese. Play detective if you are an arborist, or check your arborist knowledge. Note where the redbud trees in your area, and can you identify that redbud? Look at the foliage. Is it purple? Is it green? Look at the beautiful cluster, the color of the clusters of the blooms coming out. Is it pink? Or if it's pink and 40 feet tall, that's going to give you. If it's 40 feet tall, it's not a Mexican redbud. What's about 15 to 20 feet tall? Is it Mexican or is it Texan, Mexicana or Texensis? I can't remember. And so you compare the colors of the bud. But have some fun. Research these redbud trees. If you want some, here's some, hopefully some help for you. But this is a review of the redbud trees that you'll find available and growing in South Central Texas.